Hey everyone, Jeff Johnson here from the Gazette with my cohorts, Jeff Linder and K.J. Pilcher for a regular season finale / postseason starting Prep Huddle podcast. Because that's what we've got. We've got regular season finale for the big classes 3A, 4A, 5A, and we've got first round of the playoffs and 2A, 1AA, and 8-player. Let's go, right, boys? This is a fun part of time. This is the best part of the season, as far as I'm concerned, right?
Yeah, let's get it going.
Let's before we talk playoffs, let's look back last week at some games, and I don't know if there was any real intrigue, guys, as far as I think we pretty much knew small class wise kind of where everyone was sitting and who was getting in, and things like that. No real surprises there. As far as I saw, regular season or big school wise, I don't know where you want to start. Let's randomly, let's start out with another Des Moines suburban conquest of an Eastern Iowa foe. Johnston beat Cedar Rapids Kennedy 28-7, and second loss of the season for the Cougars, who I believe are still in, right, Jeff Linder? You have all this figured out, right?
Mathematically not yet, but common sense wise, yeah. I don't see any way they don't make it. I think you can say they're virtually in.
Still, when we look at where the power is again this season, I mean, that's another notch in the suburban Des Moines belt, I guess. I was having a Twitter conversation with a mom from out there. It was friendly, don't worry. Earlier this week about how they were kind of kicking butt as far as the head-to-head matchups. And I was trying to think. It was I counted Ames as a Central Iowa team, even though I don't know, they're not even going to be in the CIML, but still it's a Central Iowa team to me. So I had 2-5 maybe was the record for Eastern Iowa playing against Central Iowa foes in the biggest class. I could be wrong on that. The 2 wins, City High over Ames handily, and then Cedar Falls beat Johnston. And then the losses, I think there's a couple teams lost to Southeast Polk from around here. No shocker there. Another one lost to Dowling. So, I mean, we read too much into, late season game between 2 teams, one from Central Iowa, one from Eastern Iowa, or is this just another example of how much better Central Iowa is than Eastern Iowa in 5A football?
I think it's the latter. I think it's just another piece in a long line of evidence that the power's over there, and it'd be different if it was a 21-20 game. It's 28-7, and that was one of the supposedly one of the very best Eastern Iowa teams against maybe the 6th or 7th, 8th best Central Iowa team. So that's not a bad look, or that's not a good look.
KJ, you agree with that?
Yeah. If you look at what I think if you look at 3, at least in the corridor, the 3 best teams that we kind of have in 5A here, Kennedy, Cedar Rapids, Prairie, and Iowa City High. And you look at the the games that they had against Central Iowa teams. It was Dowling beat City High 34-0. Johnston, which is 5-3, beat Kennedy 28-7. I think it might have been even 21-0 really early in that game as well. And then I can't remember what the Prairie Southeast Polk score was, but it was not a real competitive ball game. So you're looking at least 2 of the games being 62-7 Southeast Polk was 41-0. So you're talking about 103-7 with teams in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City corridor facing Central Iowa teams in 5A. So that, I think that's a microcosm of those, top 4, 5, 6 teams in Central Iowa compared to, their Eastern Iowa counterparts. We'll see what Pleasant Valley can do. They really have not ventured into Central Iowa.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah,
Geography.
right. And it doesn't make a lot of sense
Right.
travel wise. Cedar Falls, they've kind of gone over and had some success, but it's against maybe that mid-range, those mid-range schools outside of the top 4 or 5. Just haven't shown the Eastern Iowa just, it's nothing new. I mean, we've been talking about this for probably almost a decade now. So, there's only, I can think of, the Xavier teams that, lost to Dowling and Ankeny. Kennedy, Washington had teams, but, at that point, Dowling was unstoppable pretty much. This isn't anything new. And it's those 4 or 5 teams in Central Iowa. Let's not talk about it being from top to bottom, because I don't think that's the case. Even though some other people might want to paint it that way, but those top 4 or 5 teams are just head and shoulders above anybody in this area.
Yeah, and I think you could make the argument that, if you were doing a top 10, I didn't do this, but I think you could make the argument without anybody really complaining about it, that it could be 9 Central Iowa teams in PV. You've got Dowling, Southeast Polk, and Ankeny for sure, and then you've got Johnston, you've got Northwest, you've got Waukee, Centennial, Urbandale. So, and nobody around here has really proven they can beat those teams.
Yeah.
You're stretching it a little bit with a couple of those.
Yeah.
But, but I mean, it's, it's still an imbalance of power, but,
Yeah.
A lot of it comes, and let's face it, a lot of it comes down to, just how well off some of those school districts are.
Facility. Yeah.
It's
and I will say this. I think after those 3 teams that we mentioned in Central Iowa, I think Xavier could play with anybody else over there and probably beat anybody else and probably be fairly competitive with Dowling, Southeast Polk, and Ankeny.
You hear that, Saints? Petition to go up, baby. We want to see it. Eastern Iowa pride. We need somebody from Eastern Iowa. Yeah, it is what it is, and it's not going to change until somebody from over here bows up, as the old cliche goes, and actually beats one of the powers over there in a big game. So, we'll see. We'll see how this rolls. 4A, I guess, kind of looking at big games. KJ, you were at Xavier, where somebody actually scored on the Saints, albeit just 3 points. Newton broke the shutout streak. We just talked about Xavier. I mean, man, I'm just so looking forward to the postseason, because I see 3 teams at the top there, kind of like 5A in my opinion, with Waverly and with Council Bluffs, Lewis Central, and with Xavier. It's like, man, this could be fun. And I mean, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that Xavier can win a state championship, right? Especially from what you saw last week
I mean, they're unbeaten and they've dominated the teams that they faced so far, but so has Waverly Shell Rock, and Lewis Central is, they had their close game against Harlan, which I think is a team that on a one-on basis could play any of the teams in the state um, to a good game, regardless of class. To say it's a team that could win a state title, sure. Are they? I don't. It's hard saying just because you've got two other teams that were dome teams that have been just as dominant and just as good, pretty much. We'll see, but I tell you, they looked really impressive against Newton, who I think, I wasn't really sure what to think of Newton coming in, just because they got shut out by Washington for their first loss. Before that, it'd been 6-0 or 5-0. But had some close games. But their defense is really good, guys. I mean, I think Newton's defense is what the strength is there. They've got a good running back in Klein, but Xavier's defense is so strong. Like you said, 18 quarters. That's 4.5 weeks of not giving up a point. That's half the regular season. And they were that way. They gave up, it was a drive at the end of the first half. I don't think had given up more than one first down before that final drive, before the half, and held Newton to a field goal, a 30-yarder, I think. And, those were the only points they've given up since the third quarter against Dubuque Waller. But, Ronan Thomas has done a good job stepping in at quarterback. He had a huge game against the Cardinals. He's got some good targets at receiver. You've got Aiden McDermott, obviously kind of leading the way, but I think they have more than that. Michael Cunningham has really made big gains from a year ago. And he really kind of opened things up for that offense. He came out the first drive, two big runs, one I think for a 40-yard touchdown. That loosened things up for the passing game, and then they were able to really do whatever they wanted. And of course, that defense, gives them the opportunity to really, kind of do things without a fear of failing, if that makes sense, because your defense is gonna, you can make a mistake or you can have a bad drive, because the defense is gonna pick you up. And tell you what, they're playing really well. Should finish the regular season unbeaten, and then I think Linder, you can correct me if I'm wrong. They're looking at a home dome type of schedule in the postseason, and that works out in their favor as well.
Yeah, and I think their RBI is 1 right now, so yeah, I think they're sitting really good for 2 home games and 2 dome games.
There was some interesting other stuff in 4A, guys, that kind of interested me last week. Western Dubuque and Waverly Shell Rock were tied at halftime at 7. And Waverly pulled away in the second half and won 35-14. That was a significant game over in Central Iowa. And, there's a group of 4 or 5 teams that are just, really good. Bondurant Farrar doubled up in all at 28-14. Carlisle beat Norwalk 49-28. I think all those schools were rated. And Marion beat Mason City 28-7. And Marion plays a very winnable game Friday night against Waterloo East with a chance at a winning record. Jeff, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we really haven't talked much about the Wolves and started off kind of rough, but the opportunity to go from 1-8 to 5-4. How significant is that, guys?
Well, it's a great turnaround for them, and I will say this: their playoff chances are better than we think. Right now, they're the third team out, but Burlington plays Fort Madison. Burlington's ahead of them. One of those teams would probably fall behind Marion. I think Norwalk plays Bondurant, so that might knock Norwalk down. And I think Lamar's has a tough game yet. So, if Marion wins, I would say they're probably close to 50-50 or better of getting in.
And go ahead, KJ.
Well, I was just gonna say Lamar's has Fort Dodge, we've seen what Fort Dodge has been able to do at times the last few years. So the one thing with Marion, to point out, one, I don't want to speak for you guys, but if I were to sit here and say, yeah, I had Marion with a winning record when it was all said and done, I'd be lying if I claim that from the beginning of the year. But one of the things I remember talking to Coach Joyner about, and it was midway through the season, after they came away with that victory at Central DeWitt, which put them at 2-2, and they had a tough 2 weeks with Western Dubuque and Waverly Shell Rock, right? We talked about how the rough opened with Clear Creek Amana and Cedar Rapids, Washington. They changed some things up, beat a ranked Benton team, and then at the time beat a ranked DeWitt Central team. Then they had Western Dubuque and Waverly Shell Rock back to back. And the one thing that Coach Joyner said, we need to get through these 2 weeks healthy. If we can do that, the last 3 games of our season are winnable. So he had this vision that they could be sitting in this exact spot when week 9 rolled around. Now, whether at the time he thought that'd be good enough to kind of be on the verge of possibly getting into the playoffs or not, I don't know. But he kind of had the idea that if we could get through Western Dubuque and Waverly Shell Rock healthy, not get beat up and dinged up, we could run out the last 3 games. And they won on one of the was it the final play against Decorah, or near the end of the Decorah game, they pulled out a 14-13 win. Then they beat Mason City. Now they've got a winless Waterloo East team at home at Thomas Park. It's you got to tip your hat to the Wolves and the Coach Joyner, because he truly believed they'd be in the spot. When they were 2-2.
A couple other games. One I didn't mention, Iowa City Liberty had to come from behind and score like in the final 30 seconds with a backup quarterback to beat Burlington last week, 29-28. Scored with, I think, under 30 seconds, 25 seconds, something like that. And then decided to go for 2 and 1 and got that. That was a huge win for Liberty, obviously, and it remains to be seen, I guess, how quarterback Graham Beckman, how bad his injury is, because that obviously affects, what Liberty can do in the playoffs here. Jeff, I want you to talk a little bit. One of the 4 downs questions, I hope y'all saw it in today's paper, and it's online right now, was how do you like the RPI? And you said you liked it as is. And I pointed out how I think there needs to be a little slight adjustment as far as giving teams that play harder non-district schedules a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt than teams that don't. And I brought up Cedar Rapids, Washington as the example where Washington could lose to Pella, Friday night, and don't discount that because Pella's played an immensely tough schedule. And it's always tough to win down there. And Washington could lose and end up out of the playoffs. And now, correct me if I'm wrong for what you're saying, they can end up with the same record as Marion, but could Marion jump Washington in the RPI because of that? Even though
Well,
Washington beat Marion 41 to
they could, but there's again that caveat that if they're next to each other in the RPI, like if Marion, let's say Marion's 15 and or let's say Marion's 16 and Washington's 17, because Washington beat Marion, they'd flip. So that, but if they're not adjacent, then then Marion would get that bid. Yeah, I absolutely see what you're saying, and maybe there should be a reward for a team like Washington that plays up a class. They played up a class against Linmar and
Kennedy.
and Kennedy. So
And
that was two
Marion.
losses. And maybe there needs to be some kind of a bonus for that. I'd be fine with that. I don't know how you would do it, but I'm sure people with a lot more mathematical sense than me could find a way.
Yeah, I mean and that's just one example. And I'm not banging on anybody, but it just seems, when you play 3 5A opponents and then a 4A opponent in your non-district, whereas Newton, which still is ahead of Washington, and yes, Newton has a 6-2 record to Washington's 5-3, is still ahead of Washington in the RPI, even though Washington just went down there and won 21-0 2 weeks ago, and Newton played a 2A team, non-district, and a couple of 3A teams that aren't very good. So I don't know. That, I guess that's I like the RPI. Let's put it that way. I think it's a kind of a good way to go about determining qualifiers. But to me, there has to be some sort of slight adjustment if you're going to count the non-district games in this thing. There has to be some sort of reward for teams that are playing bigger schools or schools of in your same class, and some sort of ding for schools that are going to reach down and play lower teams in a lower class, especially if you're going down and playing teams 2 classes down. I don't know. That's just my opinion. KJ, I don't know what you think on this, but
I try not to, because I get confused and I get a headache. I pass out, wake up about 36 hours later. No, I mean, there's not going to be a perfect system, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
You're going to find discrepancies and issues regardless. But it does seem there needs to be some type of weight given to, I think Washington's a good example where, like you mentioned, two of their 3 losses are going to end up being, right now, 2 of their 3 losses are to 5A playoff teams.
And the other one's to a team that has a number 1 RPI.
Right. And that, those 2 are out of their class, I think you would want to reward teams for doing that instead of,
penalizing.
looking for sure wins or something like that. Otherwise, but
Washington does have some nice wins. Clear Creek wins a nice win, even though Clear Creek's 3-5. Marion's looking like a better win all the time.
Right.
Newton's a good win. So yeah, it pretty much just comes down to beat Pella. Beat Pella on Friday, and we don't have
all
to
this move.
See, and that's the one thing that neutralizes all this talk of the RPI too, is to steal the cliche line that we joke about a lot. Do your job, right? You win, you don't have to worry about this stuff anyway. Same thing with during the season. Okay, have a better record and you're in. You don't have to worry about that as much. Yeah.
Control the controllable.
Exactly. That's another cliche that actually fits. So, I'm sure they're not concerned about it. I'm sure the talk is going down to Pella, like for Washington, go down to Pella, take care of business, and then you don't have to worry about it. So it's yeah, it's just meant for us to bandy about
Yep.
and stuff, and the guys on the field will take care of it.
Let's run through three, a real quick couple of games and note, Humboldt suffered its first loss of the season, to Nevada, 16-8.
Right.
That was big. And then Jeff, you saw a heck of a football game in Manchester last week, Independence, last West Delaware 21-20. A couple of nice football teams right there, huh?
Yeah, I told you guys this in our meeting Monday. That was one of the best football games I've seen in years. Are they the two best teams I've seen in years? No, but it was a great game. Both teams, I think the final yardage was 348 to 347. So there was a lot of offense. There was some timely defense. Neither team turned the ball over the whole night. It was just a very well played game and very enjoyable to watch both of those teams.
All right, let's move forward. Regular season wise, and then we'll hit the playoffs, obviously, because those are the games that really count. But there are some games that still mean something, especially in 5A. And Jeff, you got this all doped out, but Prairie Linmar would seem to be a pretty big game. Friday night at Prairie. You think there's still a chance that Linmar gets in without a victory here, and you think that Prairie already is probably in? Is that kind of how you're doping things out here?
Let me take a look here. Prairie's in. Prairie's absolutely in.
Okay.
They probably would host the first round, win or lose. Well, I better not say that. Could Linmar, well, if it's a deal where Prairie would be 8 and Linmar 9, I suppose that would mean Linmar would hop them and would host, and they'd play again next week, maybe. Prairie's in, for sure. And they're probably not going to be any lower than a 9 seed. Probably are going to be stuck at 5 if they win. Linmar they're kind of in the same boat as Kennedy. They're probably in. I don't think you can say they're mathematically in, but common sense wise, they're going to make the playoffs. With a win, Linmar could jump up to 7 or 8 and maybe host that first game.
So, and then KJ's got a game Thursday night at Kingston, Hempstead, and Kennedy. And KJ, that turns out to be a big game for Kennedy, not just to absolutely 100% cement the playoff spot, but maybe host a game at Kingston Stadium in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, and that's something that Brian White mentioned a couple weeks ago with a win that they had at Kingston in week 7. He talked about just how important kind of winning each game. Obviously, the game at Johnston didn't go their way, so that puts added emphasis on this game against Hempstead to win, to be able to play that first round at Kingston. They had the big win over Davenport West, and I think they're 2-2 in their last 4 games. So not only is it a big one to secure a home game, but you also got to look at it too as you want to be able to hit the ground running when the playoffs begin. You don't want to limp into anything, obviously, and they're going to look to try to kind of get things rolling into the playoffs. So not only is it big for securing a home game, but to kind of be on the right foot starting the postseason.
All right, let's run through so the playoffs, as we said, Class 2A on down. They begin on Friday night with first round games around the state. In 2A, it's your 4th place district finisher against your champs, and then 3rd against 2nd. That's how it worked out. Anything off the top of your head, guys? I know we've all kind of talked about the game that we're looking most forward to first round. And New Hampton 6-2 at walk on 5-3 is one I think we're all looking forward to, right?
and walk on. We've talked about that. They've done their best Williamsburg act this year. They went from 0-3 to 5-3. And now they're looking like a team that probably nobody wants to play. And I think KJ mentioned this last week. What has it been? 5-6 years now that they've finished their season in the Dome. I think 5 years in a row, and in a run that's included a couple of championships. So they know how to win in October, November, and we'll see if they can do it again.
Other games that might hit you in 2A. One that I think we talked about before we started the podcast. North Fayette Valley 6-2 at Crestwood, 5-3. That's a game maybe in 2A that could be kind of interesting, guys. Kind of running through 1A. We've got one that KJ I think mentioned is Durant 5-3 at MFL Marmac 7-1. That's a fourth place at first place game. And third place is second place. Another one, maybe guys, Iowa City Regina 5-3 at Pella Christian 7-1. And there's one that's really kind of intriguing to me. Would you agree?
Yeah. Especially with the history between the two teams. For our 4 downs, I was looking back at kind of that history in those back-to-back games in the state quarters and state semifinals. I think it was 2016, 2017, or 2017, 18, where Regina won 45-43 one year and then won 37-35 in the Dome the next year. These two teams have a history and a history of putting together some really fun, entertaining, competitive postseason games. And this one, very well could be the similar. Regina's 3 losses are to West Branch, Williamsburg, and Mediapolis, 3 really good teams, I think combined 22-1. Pella Christian is 7-1. Their only loss is to Sigourney Kyoto, which is come on like gangbusters and have won 6 straight games to win their district and host Sumner Fredericksburg. So that game really is kind of at the top of the list, I guess, in 1A.
Class A, we've got some good teams in Lynn County and right around Lynn County that are in the playoffs here. We Alburnett won its district, Heroics last second game tying touchdown and 2-point conversion in regulation, then scores in overtime to beat Columbus Junction, kicked the extra point in a huge game that won a district title for the Pirates. They've been a great story. They've hosted Bellevue 4-4 in the first round. On Friday night, North Lynn, another district champ, 7-1, hosts Wapello 4-4. And then, Lisbon 5-3, another, solid club, small school from Lisbon or from Lynn County, goes up to Winthrop to play a really good East Buchanan team at 7-1. Maquoketa Valley 5-3 at Columbus Junction 7-1. And one just out of our area, I think is a little interesting, is St. Ansgar 5-3 at Wapsie Valley 6-2. I think we talked about it a lot, guys, but there's there's some pretty good Class A teams around these parts, as they say, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you just have to look at that cluster of teams, in Buchanan and northern Lynn counties. When you talked about Alburnett, North Lynn, and East Buck, all 7-1, and each of their losses have come to each other. I believe it was North Lynn beat East Buck beat Alburnett, and Alburnett beat North Lynn. I was at the Alburnett East Buck game. That was a really good game that East Buck pulled away in the final quarter. I think Alburnett North Lynn was also a really tight game as well. So Class A, you're looking at some really good teams, and I think Linder's mentioned it before. Lisbon has really played well as of late. So, and then you've got Maquoketa Valley, who's going to Columbus, who had that close loss to Albernet. The Wildcats have some good individuals, and that's a team that has some talented players that could surprise somebody.
So let's throw Central City in there as another good Lynn County team. Central City is in the 8-player playoffs at Drapola 6-2 in a first-round game that I think is really interesting. So, man, then you throw Mount Vernon in there as well. That's just about everybody made the playoffs, right? So Lynn County has some pretty good football overall in the city and just outside the city, I guess, this season. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Something that gets overlooked. Something that gets overlooked when we kind of focus on the whole 5A thing, right? And talk about how Central Iowa this and that. When you get to other classes, you really see just how talented and how good the programs are, especially in the Lynn County, Lynn, Johnson, County area. All right, looking at the Solons and the Mount Vernons, Albernet, North Lynn, East Buck, and 1A, the 8-player teams that have made strides. But just to echo what you said, JJ, a lot of talented teams in this area, especially in some of the other classes.
All right, we have a survivor pool playoff style that we went through the regular season, and I think maybe this is what we're going to do next season, maybe too, Jeff. Instead of just picking one team to win a game every week, we're going to do it just the opposite here and pick close games. Why don't you go ahead and explain what we're doing here and your pick and Nathan Ford's pick, at least here in the first round.
All right. So yeah, what we did this regular season was fun, but actually it's just way too easy. So what we're gonna do, everybody's gonna start with we're gonna say 50 points, and everybody's gonna pick a playoff game that you think is gonna be a 1-score game, so 8 points or less, and then you're gonna pick a winner in that game. So how is the score? If you get that right, and you get that in that target zone, 8 points or less, you gain 5 points. If it's 9 or more, you lose the number of points that the margin is. So if it's 35-14, you lose 21 points with a maximum point loss of 35. And then additional bonus points, if you correctly pick the winner, you gain 5. And if your game goes overtime, oh boy, everything's great. You get 5 points per overtime. So if your team wins triple overtime, you get 5 for having the winner right. You get 15 for each overtime, and a lot of chips in the bank.
That's way too much math for me, KJ, but I'm going to trust him on this that he's doing it right. So
yeah, let's face it. If there's anybody on our staff that can handle figuring stuff like this out, it's Lindy.
Yep.
Lindy's much smarter than us when it comes to this.
Yep,
I don't know about that.
No doubt.
So anyway,
Nathan
went Pella Christian over Regina. He thinks that's going to be close, with Pella Christian winning a 1-score game. I'm taking Waukon over New Hampton, and I'll let you guys talk about your picks for this week.
KJ, Loretta, what do you got?
Oh, yeah, I just didn't want to double up on anybody. Both of those previous 2 picks are good choices. I was kind of intrigued by North Fayette Valley and Crestwood, but I think I'm going to pick MFL over Durant in a close one. Hoping there's a lot of rushing the ball, which might melt the clock a little bit, keep the score low. Hoping Nolan DeLong can keep it close, but have MFL winning a close one there.
And I'm the idiot who's going to go with and try and pick a close game in the volatility of 8-player. So
That's
where
brave.
you can score points in literally seconds. I think the Turkey Valley and Edco game is going to be close. I'm picking Turkey Valley to beat Edco, but I think it's going to be a 1-score game or less, and hopefully in overtime. So that's what I'm going with. I'm kind of sticking my neck out here and trying to pick an 8-player game. So, give us your thoughts, folks, at home. What do you got? What do you think is going to be a close first round game of the playoffs? You can tweet us at JEJE66 for me, at KJ Pilcher, or at JT Linder. Let us know what you think might be your closest or what might be a great first round game that way. So
maybe what we can do next year with this, maybe we can make it a public game and people can play along with us.
That's great. Some sort of prize.
Who we should have included on this? Parker, our buddy Parker Leibel, who would like to congratulate on being accepted into a program at the University of Iowa. Saw that on Twitter. Congrats, Parker, on becoming a Hawkeye. And maybe when we get to the Dome, we'll touch base with him. Maybe get some semifinal picks or finals picks for him.
Sounds good.
He's just going to embarrass us all because
I know.
So
better than we
that's
are.
fine. That's fine. So, all right, Friday night. I'm going to be at Prairie for Prairie and Linmar, regular season game. You guys are going to be out and about for playoff games, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to be at Winthrop. I'm going to be at Winthrop by way of Kloski. And I'm going to cover Lisbon and East Buchanan. I'm looking forward to
it. KJ?
I am going to Alburnett. That was my pirate impersonation. It was terrible. I know. I should really think things through before I do that. But I'll be at Alburnett for their game against Bellevue. Looking forward to that.
They have a great place there that serves roasted chicken. It used to be called Mahoney's, but I can't think what it is now. It's Fuller's Pub and Grub, maybe, I think is what it is. So check that out pregame if you feel so inclined. Great place up there. So, all right. We will have, if you're not aware, we'll have after this round of the playoffs, it kind of all gets redrawn into brackets, correct, Jeff? So everything will be bracketed the rest of the way out here, and we'll get to see and pontificate on brackets and who we think is going to survive in the smaller classes, and then obviously there will be brackets for the 3A, 4A, and 5A. That'll be all available on Saturday sometime, so that'll give us a lot to talk about next week. And any closing thoughts, guys?
Not really here, KJ.
I would just like to tell Mother Nature thanks for one more week in the 70s. We're that much closer to 7 degrees and sunny at the Unidome. But week 9 after being in stocking caps and winter coats last Friday, we're gonna go back to having highs of 75 this Friday, which Iowa weather. Good luck predicting it.
Well, I hope you guys have all enjoyed our us talking about high school football all season here on the Prep Huddle podcast. Sure as heck beats having to talk weekly about how bad Iowa's offense is or why Iowa State can't win a close game. So it's been a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll get back at you again next week with a super playoff edition of the Prep Huddle podcast. Say a prayer for Jeff Linder. He's got some prep cross country postseason coming up in volleyball and everything. So he's a busy dude. Actually, we all are. So great time of year. Thanks for joining us, and we will let KJ take us out as always.
Got some bobblehead up here from our buddies at Northland. Keep your head on a swivel.